Guys, and welcome to today's video where I'm going to show you how I made this little rainforest tank for my teeny tiny baby pink tongue skink. This isn't specifically for skinks, this can be for a range of rainforest or forest or jungle dwelling animals. So I started off with an old 45 by 45 by 60 centimeter Exoterra tank. This used to be Drogo's tank. So it is a tad marked from old expanding foam and silicone sealant, but we do tidy that up. And of course it had already been thoroughly cleaned and disinfected. Anyway, as you can see, I'm placing down some cork tiles. I really wanted a simple and easy quick background, as I really didn't fancy covering the whole back in expanding foam and carving, etc., especially where the expanding foam that I was using is white. Usually I'd use a touch and foam black pond expanding foam, but I couldn't really find it anywhere. To fill the gap between the tiles, I used a branch. I wanted to create an area that kind of protrudes out of the background so it's not so 2D and acts as a mini tree trunk. This branch worked really well for that. Anyways, I covered the back with expanding foam. I could have done this with silicone sealant, but honestly the expanding foam, I had so much of it, it sets quicker, it doesn't smell, and it is super strong. I was also trying to figure out how to attach more branches to this one branch, so there were more climbing opportunities. I also added a large cork hollow. Now the reason for doing this is because not only do skinks hide in it, and they're known for liking to hide in hollows in the wild, but because of the sort of shape of it, there's an area where they can lay out high up and still get some UV rays, so there's a basking opportunity there. I also went ahead and added this coconut hide. I was originally just going to hang it in the tank, but I felt like we needed a lower hide, low down. Little did I know that he was going to be so small that half an oak leaf would be a good enough hide for him. I haven't actually seen him use this coconut hide yet, but maybe he will in the future. I then went ahead and used silicone sealant and soil to cover the expanding foam. The soil I'm using is actually old Isopod soil, which I'll get into a little bit later because we do use it a lot in the tank, and I'll explain why. Then I went ahead and scraped off some of the old silicone sealant on the side of the tanks, and also gave the side of the tanks a good clean to remove any old watermarks. We then moved the tank up to the reptile room and began planting it. I of course started with a drainage layer, which is super important. It's very easy for tanks like this to become overwatered, stagnant, smelly, and end up failing as the roots kind of rot. I use habitat clay balls and an Exoterra mesh layer. Now for substrate. So this was a mix of earth mixed by Arcadia and isopod soil that I've raised colonies of isopods in before moving them into my tanks, and so the soil's almost been cycled by these isopods. It's probably full of isopod poop. Loads of things have been broken down like you would find in a tank, like an established tank, and so I didn't know if it would work, if it still would be extremely fertile because they've been in it, or it would be useless. But so far the plants are still alive, it's going well, and yeah, I thought I'd just as well use it. I also added in moss, leaves and cork to the mix and made sure the substrate was deep. Pink tongue skinks not only climb, but they also lurk in the leaf litter and they will burrow. I've actually since added even more leaf litter as I discovered just how much he likes to hang out in it during the day sometimes. I mean, if you've seen any of the videos on him, you'll see he'll be up high basking, he'll get some UV, he'll then go on the floor and hide. He uses the entire tank. So unlike blue tongue skinks, they will use both horizontal and vertical space, so you want to make sure these areas are perfect. So for example, if you had a crested gecko, they obviously climb, but they don't spend that much time on the bottom of the tank, so you're designing that more for the cleanup crew. Whereas Rex, my pink tongue skink, will also hide at the bottom of the tank as well as the top. Having deep substrate not only helps obviously the skink explore, but it also helps the cleanup crew, the plants, and it tremendously helps keeping high humidity, which is what the species need. I then added in this palm. I actually got this as a whole plant, but when I was removing all the soil and cleaning the roots, I discovered it actually comes off into little sections, so I decided to place that around the tank. I then added the good old golden pothos. If you're ever struggling to keep a plant alive in a reptile tank, use a golden pothos. It will not let you down. Obviously, I only kind of wanted simple plants in here. It's not a massive tank, but these are doing well so far. I then continued to add the rest of the soil and some bits from my old Isopod tank. This included some wood chips, which I wouldn't usually include, but having looked at some of the forest floors, what they encounter in the wild, you know, it looks quite normal and natural, and it also will help support the cleanup crew as it breaks down. I then gave the entire tank a big water. I think this is important because sometimes these soils seem moist, but then once you put the plants in, they just kind of shrivel up. So you want to make sure you give them a good water. I then added in some cleanup crews. So first we have some earthworms, and I actually thought to myself, these will work as cleanup crew, but also they'll be a great natural source of food that the skink can just live with, but also hunt. Little did I know they'll end up being bigger than the skink, so maybe when he's older he might have a few. I didn't buy any more isopods just because I have so many, particularly in Lyra, my crested gecko's tank, so I scooped maybe a tiny handful, if that, of soil, and there were so many isopods that came from it that they are now just sort of living in there. Now, he could be eating some of the baby isopods, but the adults, once again, are pretty big for him. I'm sure eventually he might eat them, but at the moment they have time to sort of establish a colony. I also added in a water bowl, which I later did take off the lid and reduce the amount of water in it because the skink was so small, but I figured this water bowl will not only help increase humidity, but it will also ensure that the skink is definitely drinking. Equipment wise, I'm using a deep heat projector, a Pro T5 6% Forest UV kit, and a Jungle Dawn LED bar, though in some of the shots you might notice I'm using a very old Jungle Dawn, but I do switch that out. Also, I accidentally ordered a 3-foot long Pro T5 for my 1.5 wide tank, so it is double the size. It kind of hangs off the edges a bit awkwardly, but once he's bigger he will likely end up in a 3 or 4 foot long tank anyway. Now, of course, everything I use in here is safe for a range of reptiles, amphibians and inverts, so this isn't specifically just for pink-tongued skinks, but I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more about how he got on in his tank, I'd highly recommend checking out my pink-tongued skink playlist, which I'll link below. But yeah, this may seem like a massive tank for such a tiny animal, but trust me, he uses the entire thing, and as I said, he will get an upgrade once he gets bigger. Anyway, if you haven't already, please subscribe, but thank you for watching, and goodbye.